everybody. This is Gretchen, and I'm here with another episode of Digging Deeper. And we're here with Laura, who is from Michigan. And we're going to be talking today about her green burial experience with her husband who passed away last year, and his name is Bob. So, welcome, Laura. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks so much. It's great to be talking with you.
Yeah. So, everybody, Laura and I have been chatting a little bit behind the scenes today and back and forth for the last month. So, we're a little bit familiar with each other, which is nice. We decided that we were just going to start today. I'm going to ask her how she how she came upon green burial for her husband. How did that whole thing get started? And I'll let you take it away, Laura.
Thank you. Well, actually, I started looking into green burial and home funeral about 15 years ago. A friend of mine who's an end of life doula had a wonderful workshop to explain the process and explain how really doable it is to do a home funeral with help. And so at that time, I became very enthusiastic about both home funeral and green burial. And I still have all my workshop materials. So I felt, well, I had kind of the first stage of learning about it.
Hmm.
My husband and I were married for 47 years. We had a long relationship, and we knew from the beginning, because he was 19 years older than I was, that we would likely see him leave the planet before me.
Yeah.
And we talked about it decades ago. We both just had decided we were going to be cremated. We didn't talk a lot about it, but that was just kind of the understanding. But after I had gone through the process and educated myself, my thinking started to shift.
Hmm.
And I talked with him about it, but he wasn't really easy to engage in a conversation. He didn't really want to think about it, as many people don't.
True.
So I kind of let it rest. And every few years we'd come back to it. We went through the process of taking care of our estate matters and making sure our wills were in order, and eventually went to a trust. So there was a lot of work around that in the last years of his life.
Hmm.
So that's more taking care of the nuts and bolts
Yeah.
of life matters. But I became kind of resigned to the fact that it would be in my hands. And in fact, it was.
Hmm.
Bob was a very healthy man. He lived a very good life. And he and I both went through the time of COVID. Not, well, we were lucky. We didn't need to go to hospitals or interact a lot with anybody besides our primary care doctors, husband and wife team, who
Hmm.
walked the same non-mainstream path that we do.
Hmm.
So as I got closer to the time that Bob, I could see that the change was really picking up and he was moving towards his death. I had a helper with me, but we were at home because that was his wish, to be at home.
Hmm.
And I had also arranged about 10 years before with a funeral home, so they had all this information and I had a number to call.
That's good.
And when Bob died, it was 4:30 in the morning, and I can remember
Wow.
every
Hmm.
second of that time.
Yeah.
It was a very powerful experience.
Yeah.
And the first thing that happened was I thought, oh no, it's 4:30 in the morning. Nobody's up. What am I going to do? Well, I knew the things that I had to do and the steps I had to take, but it was very overwhelming. And one of the people I called was my friend Mary Lynn, who's a um, end of life doula, and she came right over to help me.
Oh, that's nice.
And
Had you been
uh,
following with him?
I had dealt with the legal issues, and you really have to call 911 if you don't work with hospice. And so the team came in and the police came in and we all did what we had to do. And then they left.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
now I have to take the next step. And so I called the funeral home. And fortunately, uh, Mike answered the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike I'll just say he's the funeral director, and he is very much a supporter of green burial,
Mm-hmm.
which hadn't come into the picture yet. But they were going to send the hearse over there with the wagon, they call it, to
Mm-hmm.
pick Bob up. So it was on its way when Mary Lynn came, and she walked right up to me and walked right into my face and said, "Are you ready to have Bob go?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "I don't know. I don't know." I mean, I was very overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she said, "Then you're not ready." And she was there to greet them and apologized that we weren't going to let them take him away.
Yeah, and I just want to pause you right there,
Yeah.
Laura, because I have been through that part too. When my boyfriend I was telling you had died of melanoma, and it was time to leave the hospital. He'd only died a few minutes before, and I remember walking out with his parents and turning back and looking. It was the last time I ever saw him. So that moment, that's for some, that's the last time you're going to see them before they're prepped in a funeral home or whatever happens with them, cremated. And so I just want to put like a note right at that point. It's such an important part to maybe be prepared for that you might not be ready to walk away within, 10 minutes after they pass or when the cops leave or whatever. So, okay, continue on.
I think
Um,
that's a very good point.
yeah.
And I feel very lucky that I had done the work I had done and discussed and learned what kinds of things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do have time and we
We
can
do. It's
choose.
not an emergency. Yes.
Now, not everybody is in the situation I was in where Bob was at home,
Mm-hmm.
although this is becoming more and more possible with hospice. But it turned out to be an enormous comfort to me and a process of getting grounded with the reality that he was gone now.
Yeah.
Um, we were talking about the fact that, you think someone is going to make it. You think someone's going to, you don't imagine that someone can actually die. And even at
Yeah.
93, uh, I was around people who were really rooting for him. Even his doctor was, thinking he could maybe pull through.
Yeah.
So,
The doctors are do that too. They keep going and going with things, even our animals, when they're 14 years old, we're still trying to keep them alive, and it's clearly their time.
well, if there's something more complicated, for me, I feel it was not trying to keep Bob alive,
Hmm.
but to give him the opportunity if he wanted to be there. And,
Right.
as long as there's breath of life, you can't just walk away
Right. Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
or say, okay, you're done.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's a very important journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my first focus was that I could have a home funeral. And so my friend Mary Lynn and also my neighborhood, I live in a little cul-de-sac, and all of my neighbors were very close. And so
Hmm.
they were instrumental in helping me make the first night we just had a visitation of our neighbors to come over.
Hmm.
And I don't know how much to talk about a home funeral, but it's a very simple process to prepare the body, and then you use dry ice.
Yes.
So at this point, the funeral director was helping me.
Hmm.
He had been here to visit, and we talked about each step of the process.
Yeah.
Um, but
Dry
the
ice is
day
very
that
efficient.
the funeral happened, that it was 2 days later, um, I had to make some decisions. And I had just always planned that Bob would want to be cremated. So I called his son, who was
Hmm.
in California, right after the ceremony. He couldn't be there for the funeral, but because of a friend of mine, we had a little Zoom connection.
Hmm.
And about 7 or 8 people were able to participate in that they could all view what was happening. We didn't have a screen up for them to say anything, but
Yeah.
that was great. So I
Yeah.
called Bob's son Jeff up and asked him how he felt about it. because I was going to have to make the decision. Well, as Jeff put it, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and in my tradition, we have a natural burial, and that's what I'd
Yeah.
really like for my father. And I
Yeah.
said, well, I am delighted that you would, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to talk about it because Bob just wouldn't decide. And he
Hmm.
said, yes, he did. He decided to let us decide.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
that really gave me a feeling of comfort. And I said, well, I'll have to get right to this. And I called my funeral director, Mike, my
Hmm.
funeral director, became a good
Hmm.
friend. Um, and he said, oh, we can do this. And he was on it. And he had found 3 cemeteries. We picked the
Hmm.
one that was actually the most wonderful because it's 15 minutes away from where I live. And
Hmm.
it was in a place, a natural setting where there's a walking trail right next to it.
Oh,
And
that.
Bob and I had even walked in that cemetery many times.
Oh,
So that really was magical, that it
yeah.
all fell in place,
That's wonderful.
that
Yeah.
we could grant Jeff's wishes, and for me it felt more important to be respectful of him. He was
Yeah.
going through a very rough time because his mother had died just a year before.
Oh.
And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
he took it really hard when his dad passed.
Yeah.
And so that's, kind of the basic story. I
Hmm.
had been pretty challenged, especially the last 2 years of a 10-year process of helping him as he went
Hmm.
through changes. And I had a very bad knee for all of my adult life, and it finally gave out on me.
Hmm.
So in June of that year, last year, I actually needed a knee replacement. And so
Hmm.
for those months leading up to it, I was mostly taking care of myself. And I was
Yeah.
very grateful to have my friends around me. And on that day when he was buried, one of my um, one of my the practitioners I work with said, "You can't go. You can't walk."
Hmm.
And so they, again, through the magic of technology, we were hooked up by cell phone.
Hmm.
And I called two very dear friends who went and were there to represent me.
Oh,
And
that's.
he had a video running of the process so I could see what was happening. And Bob was buried in a beautiful shroud.
Hmm.
And um,
That was my next
many
question.
people, many people had come to the funeral and to say goodbye to Bob. And so
Hmm.
I felt he was really sent off well. And there was no question. The shroud was, to me, a special, it was the right choice.
Yeah.
Um, there are, there are all kinds of compostable caskets and options that people can use. But the shroud was a beautiful piece of work. And I'm a fabric artist, so it
Hmm.
very much appealed to me.
Yeah. I know. I really love the shroud too. I love that you can use sentimental pieces of fabric, or you can just do a linen shroud. But there's something about it that just adds to the ritual to me. I don't know why. Maybe because the shroud has been used for thousands of years, but I love it.
I think you're right.
Hmm.
Um, one of my special interests is in storytelling. And one of my um, most beloved teachers comes from the South. And the
Hmm.
tradition in the South is um, both in storytelling and in caring for your loved ones when they pass on. It's all done by the family
Hmm.
and the preacher. In
Hmm.
her in her community, the preacher was her grandfather, and
Wow.
she said her grandmother had 3 aprons on the wall. One was for canning, one was for fancy, and one was special for when there was a death in the
I
village.
remember you telling me that. Yes.
And
Yeah.
she strapped that on, and the pockets had all kinds of tools and devices that she needed so that she could go and be with the family and help to wash the body and prepare it for burial.
Yeah.
And also, there were candies for the kids, and you know,
Yeah.
everything to include people in the process
Mm-hmm.
because people were too poor
Mm-hmm.
to pay for a funeral.
Yeah.
And so this was an ancient tradition that was the way it had always been done. And I find um, in my own life, um, it just feels more in the natural order of things. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
gardener. I love to work in the dirt and watch things grow and feel a real kinship. So when I learned about green burial as a real option, which I didn't even know was possible,
Mm-hmm.
it feels so much more like how I want to give back
Yeah.
for all that I've been given in life. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I found it to be uh, a very the word comfort keeps coming to mind, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something, there was a completeness in it.
Yeah, that's what was coming to my mind, a completeness, but a
Yeah.
comforting completeness because having a family participation more, it's like you're doing everything you possibly can, especially after a long time caregiving. It's almost like you can't stop. And then the death happens and like you feel like, okay, you're switching gears, but um you want to see it through, you want to see it through and honor that body. And I just feel like natural burial answers that for everyone involved. And part of the reason why I wanted to do these talks is because I feel like natural burial also is the missing piece in our culture that helps us live, more present, fulfilling lives. That's that's my
You're right.
theory.
Well, I don't think it's a theory. I think we've lost touch
Yes.
with both birth and death as being a natural process. And
And touch is the perfect adjective because it's literally that hands-on death, the hands-on of death that brings it in to the body and brings it home, of the reality of that we all live in, that there's
and then
life
we
and
can
there's
begin
death.
to think about what legacy do we want to leave.
Hmm.
Bob had an opportunity to be thinking about that for the last 3 years of his life because I kind of wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
I kept talking to him about it.
Yeah.
And so, in his own way, and I didn't learn of a lot of it until I was left here, and this is his office that I'm sitting in, or used to be. I found clues that he had left a trail for me of things that were important to him. So, I had poems from his book of poetry to read and at his funeral. And there is a wonderful poem that I read that'd be a wonderful way to end, to give his words. I would
Yes,
have to
I
look
would
for a
love
minute.
that.
So you
I'm a
go ahead and
writer and I
talk
would.
to me for a minute. I'm going to take a quick look here if I can pull it up.
Well, yes, I will tell you because I am finalizing the death of my beloved older woman friend, and she was a writer, and she has left me clues throughout her stuff. She died April 10th, and I'm finding all of her words of wisdom all throughout her papers. And I'm like, she knew she was going to pass at some point, and that I was going to be helping her with these things, and we talked about her death a lot, so we were both really prepared, and it has helped me so much. I feel like through her words and me finding them that she's with me, that we created her ending in a way together. Even though it was a surprise when she passed, but we just were very comfortable talking about it with one another. But I've also had the experience like where it's not comfortable either. And that's a little bit more challenging in trying to, figure out what they wanted and stuff.
I have a friend who has done a lot of thinking about her leaving. She's in her 80s. She lives in a long-term care center and can't walk, so she can't rise from her bed. And she's making a very beautiful life every day.
Mm-hmm.
She's an artist. She's actually gone back to doing a little painting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she recently told me about her plan for her exit party. That's what she wants to have. She
Mm-hmm.
wants an exit party, and she has it all worked out. She's even written some songs, and
Wow.
it gave her great joy. And there's a guest list, and all those things can be very helpful to those who are left behind.
Yes,
Because in that
absolutely.
moment of that, for me, when Bob was gone, no matter how much I knew it was coming, no matter how much I prepared for it,
Mm-hmm.
um, I didn't think about it a lot because I knew
Yeah.
that there is no preparation.
Yeah.
But there were certain things that I did do, and I encourage people to really think it through and at least make a list. You can always change it. You can take out that piece of paper every year, like on the date when you change all the light bulbs in your house, because you know they're going to burn out. For me, it's in the fall here in Ann Arbor when everything dries up and
Mm-hmm.
starts to get cold. All the light bulbs start to go off. So I make the date on my calendar, change the light bulbs. And it's also just a good idea to go through the papers that you set aside, and each time it gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that piece, but even more important, it's really helpful to talk to your family or
Yeah.
to the people who will follow after you so
Yeah.
that they verbally have been able to speak and you have a conversation about what your wishes are. It's always good to have it in writing, but
Yes.
what I've told the people who will, because I don't have any children, who
Mm-hmm.
will be left behind is you'll be in charge. I won't be here anymore.
Yeah.
But here are the things that are important to me, and I trust you. I trust you to to do it the way that it's right.
Yeah.
I did buy a grave plot
Oh, good.
so that I'll be at least in the neighborhood Bob's in.
Yeah.
We don't have a feeling it would have to be buried side by side, although I did make a joke about, well, you could just put me on top because, it's going to be some years.
Yeah.
It would be normal. No.
Yeah.
But, going to the cemetery and being with him, it's not him. My memories of him, a sense of this is where he came to rest
Yeah.
is very, very lovely, and I hadn't expected that that would be something I would do. Although in my tradition, um, the family, my father's family, uh, we all went to the graveyard, as
Mm-hmm.
we called it, the cemetery, on Decoration Day. And we've
Mm-hmm.
lost Decoration Day as a
I know.
holiday. And I think
Yeah.
Decoration Day is a beautiful holiday.
I do too. I do
That's when you
too.
go to honor those who have gone before. And Memorial Day is about our veterans and about those who've been lost in war, and that's an important and honoring day. But I
Mm-hmm.
think um, they've tried to smush two things together that are different. And
Yeah.
of course, as you said, a lot of people are being cremated. It's not
Yeah.
so important that it has to be attached to a cemetery.
Yeah.
If someone chooses cremation, which I know a lot of people have, um, that's most appropriate. People have to make a personal choice.
Yeah. Well, I was in the cemetery on Memorial Day this last weekend, and it was beautiful there. And uh, it was very communal. There was a lot of people from the community there. And I did think about, the Day of the Dead that the Mexican culture does. And I just think it would be so wonderful to bring that back or bring something like it here because it just, even though it was a veterans thing, it was so wonderful to be with everybody in the cemetery that day. The flowers were out, the grounds were gorgeous. We were all together remembering, it's just a great thing to have. I
Well, one
think
of my teachers in storytelling has developed a love in me of cemeteries. I've always walked in cemeteries. Um, it's a nice place to walk.
yeah,
It's
there's so many.
interesting to go into the section that is the oldest and to,
Mhm.
try to imagine the stories of those people. You don't get very much information, but sometimes I feel I commune with just the energy of being in that space. And I come away feeling more, not less.
Yes.
Uh,
There's
I see that in the cemetery where Bob is laid to rest, that I started going there every couple of weeks. And I noticed that people would drive in along the little dirt road and park and get out their lawn chairs. And they'd be lining them up against along the edge of the bluff, which looks to the west. It's out
Mhm.
over a beautiful wetlands.
Oh,
And so I walked up to some of them. I said, "Well, this is great. What are you doing? Do you have someone here?" I said, "No, no, we just live in the neighborhood. We just love this space so much because there's a beautiful sunset here, and there's such a feeling of peace." And
yeah.
there were people from the neighborhood walking, walking their dogs. Some people
Hmm.
had children, and there was
Hmm.
a lovely feeling of it being a public space that
Hmm.
was set aside for quiet contemplation, for quiet activities.
Hmm.
And there's
Yes.
lovely winding paths through the whole place. So I've heard of that happening in some other cemeteries. We talked about the one in Hawaii, but that
Hmm.
there's some interest in using that public space in creative ways.
Yes.
And I can see expanding beyond the storytellers that I know in my community who hold a scary story night around Halloween and have story night.
Yeah,
Some
Waldorf,
and talk and and have stories about some of the people
in
who
the
live in that
cemetery.
cemetery.
Yeah.
You know,
The Waldorf school in our area does a story night through the cemetery. Or not, no, it's not through a cemetery, it's through a field. But I thought you could maybe do that concept in the cemetery where
I
you,
think you can.
yeah,
I
do a
think they're
story
well
night.
set up. There's parking. You can walk in on paths. You can
Hmm.
gather in a place that isn't like standing on a grave. I mean, there are options there. So it
Yeah.
intrigues me.
Yes, and Ed and I did an interview with a group that does music in the crypts, like the old church crypts and stuff. And that just, I was a little bit overly excited to interview them because it was so exciting, just what they do and the feeling that that must be to hear that classical music in those, cement spaces like that. Yeah, cemeteries, there is a lot to be done. I'm just so excited about natural burial and bringing this whole thing back around and for so many reasons, for the cemetery's sake, for family's sake, for our own better living sake. Just it's I'm a weirdo by saying death is a wonderful thing. Well, probably only me and people who are interested in this stuff can say that, but
I'll take issue with that. I don't think it's weird, but it is not yet in the mainstream.
no,
But
it's
I do
not.
feel that being connected to death and embracing death and walking towards your death, working on the legacy you want to leave, gives all that much more enjoyment to being alive.
Yeah, it's true. And the closer you get to death as you age, if you are gifted with the journey of aging, it seems like every decade you're like, wow, if I didn't live this long, I wouldn't have appreciated this so much or learned this. And I just feel like, I mean, life is such a gift, but the presence of death in life is what makes life so, I don't know, precious, I guess. Yeah, precious. And the
Yes.
more you're in tune with that, the more life is just gets sweeter and sweeter.
Whereas if you have too many things you're afraid of and too many things you shove away, your life starts to shrink.
Mm-hmm,
Your heart
totally.
starts to contract in fear. I have seen it happen so that people go into those last, years, months, weeks, days,
Mm-hmm.
and they're missing an opportunity that is
Yeah.
beautiful. And so I wanted to mention that I did find that poem
Yes.
that was
Yeah.
marked in Bob's book.
Okay, I want to hear.
With and this is a book he wrote, and the title of this book is Hello Goodbye. And he actually, we published it together. And
Oh,
I'm so glad that I have it, and it's very different kind of poetry from what people might think of as poetry. I consider it very accessible.
okay.
Okay, this poem is titled, It Is Always Now. I am sitting at my desk, writing with a ballpoint pen, to the generations yet unborn, or now in the bud, preparing to open. You will know the rain, you will know the moon, the tree and the stone, the same sun that shines on me, the same fire that consumes the candle, the rose that opens its petals, that drops its petals. You will suck the oyster from its shell. As you read this, you will see me with my ballpoint pen poised over the paper, even though I will be gone.
That's great. I love it. It's bringing to mind multidimensionality to me. Thank you, Laura, very much for that. And thank you for the wonderful interview. I'm smiling ear to ear.
Say that again.
I said, thank you for the wonderful interview as well. I'm smiling ear to ear.
Well, thank you for letting me share that and give a few practical thoughts, but also just talk a little bit about what it was actually like to go
Yeah,
through, the
yeah,
greatest loss of my life.
yeah, yeah.
So when we lose our parents, we lose our elders. That's a different kind of loss. To lose your life partner is pretty huge, and yet the cool thing, he'll always walk with me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Laura and I have this wonderful conversation. I hope you got out of it as much as I did, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.